And even with the government's reforms managed to be in recent past, we're still falling well short of the kind of housing supply the city needs to meet the challenge of growth going forward. So is there going to be a further far-reaching reform of the planning system so that we can get the private production of housing and the private production of workplaces to match the sort of infrastructure vision that's just been outlined?
Yeah, no, thanks, Aaron. Obviously, a good stakeholder question. We have made some progress on that. I mean, we have much more work to do, but there's no doubt we've made progress. And I think if you look at where we were, particularly in relation to approvals, I mean, when we came in, it was just over 20,000. That last 12 months, they got over 50,000. So we have shifted the balance towards at least matching supply and demand, and hopefully pushing beyond that. And we've obviously charged urban growth with trying to, over the next 4 years, to find 200,000 new dwellings. We've made significant progress in terms of the precincts along, particularly the northwest part of that Sydney Metro, so the Northwest Rail Link, which is now part of the Sydney Metro. Significant expectation in terms of density along that, and good cooperation with local councils. Yes, the Planning Minister is looking at additional initiatives as part of this, and the Greater Sydney Commission is expected to play a role. You know, we need to get to a position where we need to streamline across the city the capacity to not only build the infrastructure, but to align the metropolitan strategy which we've released, and that'll be part of the Greater Sydney Commission. You know, execute the metropolitan strategy, which brings the density along with the infrastructure that comes with it. So we've tried very hard to align the housing with the infrastructure, and you know, gone are the days that you know, you promise infrastructure and housing comes and the infrastructure is never there. Well, you know, that's over. So we are, I think, playing significant catch-up, but we've made good progress, but more to do. Thanks, mate.
Thank you. We have a question on this side.
Premier Roy Green from UTS Business School. A very inspirational vision and a great deal of emphasis on hard infrastructure, which is very welcome for Sydney. But the question I have is about soft infrastructure, and in particular the commitment of the government to the knowledge hubs, which engage universities and higher education institutions generally with business and government in the development of new areas of growth for the New South Wales economy. You've put some emphasis already on fintech, and I just wondered what plans you had for the creative digital precinct around UTS, for advanced manufacturing in Western Sydney, for medical technologies in the northern parts of Sydney. Thank you.
You know, it's a very good point, and yeah, I think at the outset I want to make it clear that, I mean, in terms of tomorrow's Sydney, I mean, this is looking at the physical infrastructure side in particular. I'm not disputing the significant social agenda. I'm not diminishing, sorry, the significant social agenda that we have alongside that. And you know, I've made it very clear that part of our capacity as we've grown the economy, we also, I believe, have an obligation to look after those most vulnerable amongst us, and that remains one of the critical pillars. And you know, we've done a lot, in particular in things like national disability insurance, the disability sector. We've done a lot in improving amounts in our most vulnerable kids in terms of our family and community services workers, and yeah, that will continue to be an absolute top priority for me as well. But in relation to driving the economy more broadly and the opportunities, innovation hubs, yeah, we are looking at that in some detail. Indeed, one of the frustrations I have is the way that we have interacted in terms of attracting business and trying to encourage new business and industry has been relatively ad hoc. We need to be much more strategic about the way we are doing that, and we'll have some sort of very exciting announcements in relation to that in the next few weeks, because it is absolutely the right area to focus on, and we need to be much more strategic in the way that we are driving and supporting, because it's not just the government's role, but it can play a coordinated role, and we'll be doing that. But that is a big part of the emphasis going forward.
Thanks. Other questions?
I can't really see anything.
Down the front. A microphone's on its way, don't worry.
Any Ashes questions are welcome as well. So, does that count or not? No.
Premier Sean Kennedy from the Commonwealth Bank. It's been reported that there'll be a leaders' retreat between the Prime Minister and yourself and your colleagues, the other state leaders shortly. And there's been some acknowledgement recently that the issue of vertical fiscal imbalance is still a major issue for the Federation that needs resolution. In terms of the outcomes from that retreat, if you could get your number one item on your wish list, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a good question. Aren't we out of time? Look, no, it is an incredible opportunity next week, and I'm not going to preempt sort of my thoughts or views right now, but I'll say this: I think the public is sick and tired of posturing, political point scoring, putting issues that need to be dealt with today and kicking it down the road. I think they want their leadership to say, just tell us in an honest way what are the problems, and then tell us how you are going to deal with them. And certainly that's the approach I tend to take next week. There is a significant challenge we face. The biggest challenge we face is in health funding. It's not just New South Wales, it's state and nation. The health funding requirements out to 2030 are quite staggering, and we have to find a way to deal with that, and that's certainly top of mind from my point of view, and how we are collectively going to do it. And there's many ways and many thoughts to do that, but we would be remiss, indeed I think we'd be failing our responsibility as leaders if we don't deal with that. And there's other opportunities, and I think the Prime Minister who has taken the decision that we have the sort of discussion we're going to have next week, which starts a process, and how long that goes, a few months, but it is an incredibly important time for state and federation, because there are many challenges, and my hope is that we don't, and we can't afford just to go along and have a talk fest. There needs to be some real discussions on the real issues that we're facing, and that's what I intend to do.
Great. We have another question down the front, but if anyone does have questions, keep your hand up while the question is going, and we'll have people come to you.
Thank you. Lee White, Chartered Accountants of New Zealand. Premier, congratulations already on what you've achieved, and certainly how you've set out the vision for this state, and particularly for Sydney going forward. So tremendous work already. My question sort of follows a little bit on from the last. We've seen the discussion paper recently around reforming federation, and we know there's a white paper coming soon in that space. Again, without trying to preempt, I'd welcome any of your thoughts about what you might expect in that white paper, or what could be pieces that all of us could work together in, perhaps enhancing our state and our country.
Yeah, I don't want to preempt next week in relation to that, but look, we're in a position where there are critical issues we are facing, and using health as an example, health expenditure is growing, well beyond. The states are going to have the capacity in the long term to be able to fund. We know the federal position and how they sit fiscally. So the question is how we deal with that, and that. Along with other issues, is really what we need to face. And the important point is looking at responsibilities alongside tax reform. And that's really the first time that has happened. That gives us a real opportunity to look closely at the responsibilities and how the funding across them should be dealt with. So that's why I'm so optimistic, about next week and the process we're starting. We're not going to solve everything in one day. But it'll be the first time where we can constructively consider options without hysteria around what that option might be in every possible way. Let's have a look at all the options, let's run through the detail, and let's make sure that we're dealing with the challenges that are coming at us, because they are big challenges. But that's exactly what we intend to do.
Great. Over there, table 7.
Mimi Prince from Albia. Infrastructure, we're not mentioning the ageing sewerage system. Are you doing anything about that?
Have you got a problem with your sewerage system? Have you? Can I get Sydney Water to come and see you? Well, I mean, I haven't got Sydney Water. Is Kevin Young here from Sydney Water? I could get him up here. No, he's busy. He's fixing the sewerage. There was a significant program that Sydney Water ran in terms of upgrading it, and it continues. In fact, I think they've come into their second phase. It went over about 10 years, and a big part of it, of course, there's a significant impact in terms of both loss of water, in terms of distribution of water, but there's also the environmental impacts in relation to the sewerage. So I haven't got the exact example, but the significant amount was spent in terms of that upgrade, and they've just gone into a second phase. So Sydney Water has done a lot in terms of upgrading its existing infrastructure over the past 10 years. But it's undoubtedly doing more, and if you want, I can get you details to get exactly what it's doing over the next 5 years.
Thanks. Yep.
I think we're back in the middle of the
Yes,
room.
you're right in the light, so.
Is that okay? Yes, I just over here, Mr. Premier. Martin Stewart-Weeks with the Deloitte team. One of the thoughts that occurred to me as you were speaking is the issue of governance, and some of the great cities in the world are spending a lot of time working through that, about how they actually work as a city. And we're just about to stand up the Greater Sydney Commission, and I wonder if you just want to make a few remarks about the extent to which you see that piece of institutional infrastructure, if you like, in terms of taking a more metropolitan view of the city, contributing to the kind of vision that you've just outlined.
Yeah, and you're right, and I think it's an important point on governance, because in terms of the delivery, of the infrastructure that I've just outlined, a very important first step in that was actually establishing an independent body to determine the priorities and to give us a 20-year roadmap. Rather than doing infrastructure on the basis of what is politically expedient or how this can help us in an election, it's actually done on what is needed for city and state, and that was long overdue. So the governance in relation to that is critical. In the city, we have to get to a position where we're looking at a metropolitan strategy, and rather than this corner and this corner looking at what it means for them, we need a coordinated view across it. So how do we get a coordinated view as opposed to put the sandbags up at my corner of the block? And that is an important part. Rob Stokes has spent a lot of time already in that, and is working through how that'll actually come into effect. But that is such a critical part of the city, because it's not only how we deal with the density, but it's ensuring that infrastructure that goes from one end of the city to the other, well, it's considered holistically rather than this bit and this bit and this bit. And if you look at great cities around the world, they have these sort of authorities and oversight in terms of governance, and it's been a long time coming in the city. So Rob Stokes will be rolling that out this year, and that'll have a huge impact in our capacity to actually deliver what we need to deliver.
Great. Table 9.
Yeah, Jim Salmon from John Holland. Just leading on from the last question, actually, we've got finance in place, and you've talked about an overarching committee to look at governance. Will they be going through also, I guess, some of the planning and logistic coordination needed for the rollout of approvals for these projects coming to market? I guess the other aspect of that is looking at the capacity of the delivery market for all these projects, so you're considering how that's going to be prioritised as well.
Yeah, so on the planning side, I spoke about sort of talent coming into the New South Wales public sector. We're significantly upskilling, planning, in the sense that there's more capability, additional resources that are coming in to deal with these challenges. It's a logical thing that needs to be done, and that was part of the announcement in the budget by Gladys Berejiklian, that not only are we doing these projects, we're investing more in planning to enable us, to give us the capability and capacity to actually deal with the challenges that it's going to bring, no doubt about it. And we also want to bring them forward. So we want to do everything possible we can to actually bring some of these projects forward, and on the basis of just resources in planning, well, let's invest in those resources and let's get on with it. So both of those are being dealt with critically. And then was your last question about how we coordinate in terms of all the resources or the construction projects? Yeah, and that's a real challenge. It's a great challenge to have, but it is something that we will have to monitor. And in some respects, the downturn, if you like, or the coming off of the mining investment boom gives us capacity to absorb that. But it is something we're going to have to watch. And the procurement that we are running so far, I mean, it's quite clear that we're still getting very good competitive tension, very good pricing, and it remains at a level not to be concerned about, but we'll continue to watch that. Because it's, I mean, as you see, it's unlike anything we've done before. So we're in new ground. So it's just another of the risks that we have to manage.
Thanks. To my right.
Minister, Rob Pollock's my name. I chair the RDA for the South Coast, and we fully recognise the importance of Sydney as the hub and the generator of the activity. Given the ignore that regional New South Wales suffered for many years prior to your election and Barry O'Farrell before you, I appreciate the day and the exemplification of all of the issues that are taking place. Can I suggest that there needs to be a similar emphasis on just what the government are doing for regional New South Wales, where everybody's talking about that's where the excess immigration should go, that's where the opportunities lie. We have excess capacity and obviously problems in terms of infrastructure, but I fully recognise and applaud the work that is being done. I just would like to hear more, not here today, but in another venue and another opportunity to exemplify what the government has in terms of its planning and what it's actually doing at this stage to look at what hasn't happened in regional New South Wales over a very long time.
It's a good point, and obviously, I mean, today we're talking about Sydney, so tomorrow is Sydney, but we have invested very significantly in regional New South Wales, almost unprecedented, and part of our Rebuild New South Wales program, there's $6 billion that's coming in investment, and from the South Coast, well, you know that part of our election campaign was commitment to the Albion Park Rail Bypass, as a good example. $550 million investment, a project's been spoken about for 20 years, and we're going to get on and build it. The continued work in terms of the Princes Highway, Wollongong Hospital, and indeed hospitals across regional New South Wales and regional roads. Newell Highway, we've made a significant investment, $500 million, but over $4 billion we're investing into regional roads. Regional water security, over $1 billion is going to actually into the pipes and consideration of dams and even desal plants to deal with some of the water security issues that we face in regional New South Wales. So it's an incredibly positive story, and I could give a similar talk that just looked at regional New South Wales, and I do understand the need for the emphasis. I mean, obviously, our regional colleagues spend a lot of time doing that, and at times I obviously have to, I do that as well, but it is an incredibly compelling story regionally as well as in Sydney.
Thanks for your question. While people are thinking of more questions, I might ask you about something.
We don't have to do any more questions, do we? No. We're going to have enjoyed their dessert.
We've still got 5 minutes.
Talk to people and have a good time.
It's not a hard one, don't worry.
Okay.
I know it's something you're passionate about, which is social impact bonds and social benefit bonds. It's a great innovative structure for funding some of the social infrastructure that's needed. Can you talk about the success of that and its role in the future? Or similar items?
Yeah, no, that's been fantastic, and there's many things I'm proud of. That's one of them, because it's making such a big difference. And for those not familiar in the social impact bond space, so there was one done globally in the UK. We've done the second here, and in simple terms, it's looking, well, how can we be smarter in both attracting private sector money in to help with social challenges, but at the same time focus on outcomes. So it's one thing to run a program, but what is it you're trying to actually achieve? And changing, the social impact bond does both of those. And one of the example, there's two we've done, but the example I'll give is one which focuses in on high-risk kids at the time they're either removed or just removed from their families. Now, we know if we just leave that to happen, only about 25% of those kids come back to their families, and the impact in terms of literacy, numeracy, employment, health, juvenile justice, there's a huge cost that kind of flows across from that early sort of social instance. And what this group do, Uniting Care on the back of this bond, they've got a comprehensive program that brings the families together, high intensive, lots of counselling, lots of support, and encourages them to bring the kids back to the families. Now, they believe they can get that from 25% up to 60%. And obviously, long term, provides huge savings, and those savings come back and can be reinvested back to additional services, or in this context, pay a return to the investors that have taken the risk on the way through. And that's, it's a pilot, and there's 1 year that's come in, but it has already met its preliminary target. So it's a good example. What I like is the opportunity to look at that application across all social services, and indeed John Key has asked me to go to New Zealand to talk about this because he's very keen to emulate that in New Zealand. So it's something, and I think the organisations, I know CBA and Westpac and others have been involved in that because that's such an important part of, I think, a revolution in delivery of social services.
Thank you so much. And I think we're going to call the questions here. And I'd now like to invite Mr. Katapodis from GHD to propose the vote of thanks.